Danny, first off, Danny, it's been a minute. Great to see
Greetings,
you
one
again.
and all, right?
Yeah. Hello everybody, and welcome to this rather unconventional style of programming that we're gonna have for you for the next hour. But this is something that a lot of fans here in the games community they wanted us to do this, and this is someone who this style of videos I've really grown to attraction to. So I think you guys will really enjoy this. So take a second, take a minute to step back, relax, and enjoy this next time period while we share this space together.
Oh
So,
yes.
the man that we have brought on for you guys is a man who has a very interesting and very intricate style of videos. Someone who I think I've really grown to really admire his style, and just his attention to detail and just every sense of the way. The man who went from UPN to Wheel of Fortune to Family Feud, now to Breakfast. The one, the only, the Connor Higgins.
Hi, thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Yeah.
And I
Oh
imagine
yeah.
that after breakfast, he's gonna go
How's
to
your day
dinner
been,
right after
Connor?
this.
I'm sorry, say that again, Dan.
I said after breakfast, he's gonna go to dinner, but that's for
Oh
later.
yeah, yeah, I'm doing great. It's good to be here. Thank you so much for the kind words. I appreciate it. And yeah, full disclosure to the audience, I am dressed up for dinner that I'm going to after this, so I didn't get all. I'm not. No offense to you guys, but didn't get all dressed up for this occasion.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, Connor, I think we're just gonna just kind of just jump right into this. So take us kind of like take us, tell us a little bit about, tell us a little bit about the man behind the content,
Um, well, I don't know what all there is to say, really. I got into this when I was a freshman in high school. I actually the impetus for everything was kind of like I was when I was a kid, I had liked Everybody Hates Chris. That was like one of my favorite shows, always still is to this day. I love it.
Oh man.
And I remember as a kid, I was 10, 11, 12, going through Wikipedia, and I would go through and read the Wikipedia pages for the shows that I liked, and just kind of see what network they were on, see what the production history was, all that kind of stuff, because I thought that was interesting. And I see that Everybody Hates Chris aired on this network called UPN. I'd never heard of it. I was like, maybe this is like some international network or some obscure cable channel that I've never heard of. And I find out that there was this whole broadcast network that had gone under partially in my lifetime. And I thought that was just absolutely fascinating. And I was reading a while back, the Hamilton musical, right? There's a
Oh yeah.
story. Lin-Manuel Miranda said that he read a biography about Alexander Hamilton, and he read it, and he came away from it saying, "This is so interesting. I cannot believe that nobody has made a musical about this yet." Right. So I go through and read the UPN Wikipedia page and read more about it, and I come away thinking, this is so interesting. I cannot believe nobody has made 90 minutes worth of YouTube content about this yet.
Oh
So
yeah.
I was like, well, if nobody else is going to, I guess I might as well be me. So that's kind of how I got into it. I read these stories, and I think there's so much fascinating information on these topics, but it's
Oh
all
yeah.
kind of spread out all over the place. It's not really been
Mhm.
brought together in one place. And I say, well, if nobody else is going to, it might as well be me. So that's kind of how I got into it.
Oh man, yeah, that's amazing. And like you said, like I definitely remember Everybody Hates Chris because that was one of the bigger shows, especially for UPN in the 2000s. What if there was one episode that really stands out to you from like I think if anything, like if any ways could like express like your childhood, like what would that episode of Everybody Hates Chris be for you?
Of Everybody Hates Chris, the one that jumps into my mind right away was, I believe it was Everybody Hates Spring Break, where I think Chris hits Greg with a car, if I'm not mistaken,
Oh.
and
Oh yeah.
so Greg stays with Chris for a little
Mhm.
while he's trying to get back on his feet, and I think maybe I'm conflating two episodes here. I'm trying to remember. Uh, but I remember Julius took Tanya and Drew. They went to the beach or something and had a terrible time.
Oh
That's
yeah,
the first
yeah.
episode
That
that
you
jumps
have
to my
you
mind.
have the right episode. You have the
Okay,
right episode.
okay.
Yeah, that was in the fourth season. That was like one of
Mhm.
the final season. That was in the final season. Yeah, because I
Yeah,
I remember.
and Everybody Hates Chris was interesting. I thought it was a show that got a lot better as it progressed. I think as the actors grew up and grew better at what they were doing, I think it made for a lot better show as it aged a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the one thing with Everybody's Chris is that's one show I really feel like if it really could have gone on for another season, but because the show was based on like Chris Rock's real life, you know,
Mhm.
if they went on to another season, his Julius would have died.
Yeah, and I think I read an interview somewhere Chris Rock said, when the series ended with Chris getting his, GED, and he
Hmm.
felt that that was kind of a good place to wrap things up, not being in school anymore, that kind of thing.
I
So,
wonder why they decided to wrap it up like The Sopranos, because it just goes to black at the end, right?
Yeah.
it's always good to take notes from The Sopranos, right?
Right. One of my favorite scenes from Chris is the homecoming dance episode, and when Chris is at the dinner table telling them, "Oh, I have a date with this girl," they're like, "Oh, really? Is she retarded? Is she stupid? Whatever." And Chris is like, "Why is it so hard to believe that I have a date with a perfectly nice normal girl?" And then they all start laughing their asses off for about a minute, and that's really funny. That stands out in my mind. But
Yeah, they did a respectable spoof on the Cosbys that episode.
yes, that's true. The kind of crossover to the
Hmm.
Cosby Show thing.
Hmm. So yeah, so now we kind of fast forward on kind of like your YouTube timeline, Connor. We kind of fast forward a little bit, and we get into your first real entry into the game show world, and with your video of Pat Sajak and Wheel of Fortune.
Yeah, that came about during quarantine. So I was, COVID had started. I was alone in my house and spent a lot of time online. And I came across Pat Sajak's interview that he did with the TV Academy, with the Emmy Academy.
Hmm.
They have if your audience, I assume most of your audience is aware, but if they're not, the Television Academy hosts this tremendous library of interviews, long form interviews with all sorts of interesting figures in television. And Pat Sajak did one, I think, in 2007. It was, I'm going to say 2, 3, maybe 4 hours, this huge, long thing. And I listened to it. And I thought it was really interesting. I thought it was an interesting story. And of course, I've always loved Wheel of Fortune. Watched it since I was a kid. It's always been a part of my life. I remember, and of course, it's been a part of my parents' lives, grandparents' lives for a lot longer than that. I was kind of fascinated by the idea of this show being kind of like an institution, one of the last true TV institutions that's really left
Yeah.
with its original host, or not its original host, but
Oh yeah.
the one that is commonly
Hmm.
associated with the
Well,
show.
original host and syndicated run, yes.
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I thought it was interesting, that whole dynamic of it. So I did some research and put it
Mhm.
all together and got it out the door. So that was another one of those things. It's like, this is a really interesting story. Can't believe nobody has talked about this at length. And oh, then of course the Pat Sajak show. I thought
Yeah.
it was just absolute. It blew when I first read about that. When I first read that that was a thing, it just
Hmm.
absolutely blew my mind that
Yeah.
Pat Sajak had a late night talk show. Just what, 2 or 3 years before Letterman moved to CBS. I thought, what an odd individual to
Hmm.
have a late night talk show. And I was like, I really wanted to investigate the story of, how that happened, because there was only like 1 or 2 articles that really even attempted to go into it in any detail.
Hmm.
So I thought, well, I'll be the one to kind of be the authority on how this show came about, and who thought it was a good idea to put Pat Sajak on 11:30 at night.
Right.
Yeah. One thing I always found really interesting, kind of like I don't know if you ever saw like Pat's like last daytime episode.
Yeah, I included a brief clip of it when he kissed
Mhm.
Vanna right at the end.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But I will say because Danny, he's a big fan of Chuck Woolery.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
let me show this off. Connor, have you ever
Yeah.
seen one of these before?
I have not. That,
GSN made like 100 or so of these back when he was doing that Naturally Stoned reality show for
oh
them.
my god.
I
I have
found it
never
on
seen The Naturally Stoned. It's
Oh,
something I've had on my list. I really want to watch it because it sounds just absolutely
Don't,
bananas.
don't you have like an episode of that? Like, don't you
I
have
have
like?
a few. I have a few of them somewhere. Yeah,
Hmm.
on
I might
DVD
get you
that
to
I
share
get
those with
get
me.
get from traders. Yeah, but yeah, I found that on eBay 2 years ago, and I'm like, oh, I had to snag it. I might never see it again.
Yeah,
I re-
because I told Danny about when in your UPN video when you were talking about when everything kind of went to the CW and when you said Chuck Woolery in your abbreviations.
that was a real thing. I forget where I read that, but there was some, and probably a Variety article or a New York Times something that listed what the detractors were saying CW might have stood for, and I think it was "Can't Watch, Can't Win" Chuck Woolery and Carsey Werner. Uh,
Wow.
so
Yeah, but like because one thing I've always found like with your videos is just like just the attention to detail because it's like every second you can tell how it's carefully planned, it's carefully executed. Like you kind of like it's laid out in a very intricate way, and like I've really like I'm always been interested in like your editing style. Like what makes you kind of like look at something and go, okay, what if I put a syndication thing right here, or maybe we'll talk about syndication maybe later on in like the way that you do kind of like your scripts.
That is an interesting question. I guess it's just kind of an issue of flow. I try to keep in mind. I know that I run a very niche YouTube channel. I'm aware that most of my audience is enthusiasts, but I do try to make it somewhat accessible to a general audience. So I'm trying to, introduce concepts that people who aren't really TV buffs might not be familiar with. I don't know how good a job I've done of that. I was showing my parents one of these videos, and they were stopping me midway through, like, "Okay, now remind me, what is syndication again exactly?" I'm like, "Oh, maybe I need to do a little better job of explaining exactly what that is." But I, while I'm doing research, I'm taking notes. I'm trying the best tool I can advise anybody to do when they're doing something like this is assemble a timeline. It just really helps to get an idea in your mind of what happened when, because you're going to discover sources in
Hmm.
a random order. They're going to cover random things. So just, making a list of things that happened at this time. When I was doing the Feud Part 3 video, actually, I was going through every single source. I was saving to my computer with dates, and I was just listing, okay, this is what this article says. This is what this article says. Trying to, paint a picture of what was happening when, and then I just put it together in a way that makes sense. I try to obviously go chronologically, and
Hmm.
then when it comes to the point where I'm introducing something that might need a little more context, maybe we back up and talk about that where it's necessary. So I try to do it where it can build a narrative, where it's not me stopping every second to introduce a background concept, kind of give that extra piece of context, to where I can tell a story, and when it's time, when it's a good stopping point, we can back up, introduce some background information, then we can take that time to do that.
Oh yeah, I definitely get that because I've been I've been slowly kind of doing videos in that kind of style because like I could talk about so many game show stuff. It's crazy. Um, but but yeah, I definitely think that like you really do one thing a great job is really structuring your videos. Like you definitely know there's a clear start, there's a clear end
Mhm.
to where the video is going and the ride that you get on these videos. If you've not watched this guy's videos, you really are doing yourself a disservice. The same thing that you said about the 70s version of Match Game, I'm saying the same thing about your
Yes.
videos. You're doing it a disservice because it's really just, it's one of the best productions on YouTube right now. It really is.
Oh, thank you so much. And I hope that I'll raise the bar with this next video I have coming out in a few days' time.
Oh yeah.
It's
Hmm.
really coming
Yeah.
together really
Yeah. You
nicely.
definitely want
I'm
to check that
excited to share
video.
it with you guys.
Yeah, you definitely want to check that video out, and we'll be talking about that later on. And we definitely will be talking about that later on. But definitely, keep an eye on this. Keep an eye on this man because he's a niche audience, but he really knows his stuff.
I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and but now I think we really got to talk about which is really I think your best series from top to bottom so far, and that is your story of Family Feud.
Just
Can
all
I
right.
can I take over now for a second?
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, when I got done with the Family Feud series, I thought it was excellent, and I was like, this is that kind of video is stuff that I could only dream about making. The best I could do is maybe a 20-minute audio podcast about it, but I never really thought about making a video thing. So, was there any inspiration behind Family Feud specifically for you, or how did you get the idea to do a
Absolutely.
deep dive?
Um, Family Feud, I think if I had to pick the game show that was the most personally significant in my life, I don't know that I would use the term favorite, but definitely the most personally significant. That was the game show that hooked me in. I have memories of sitting at my grandmother's house as a young child. I'm talking 3 or 4,
Yeah.
watching the TV, Family Feud on. I think it was the Karn version, and just being enthralled. Probably as a kid, just enthralled by the sound effects and the big graphics and everything that just kind of like, oh, it captures a 4-year-old's attention.
Oh yeah.
But it kept me in, and I would watch the Game Show Network, and I was intrigued by all these different hosts, even from that age, or a little older as I got in third, fourth, fifth grade. I would make my own little Family Feud games, and sit my family in the living room, connect my laptop to the TV, and I'd play game show host, and we'd have game night that I'd lead them through, and it was always Family Feud. That was
Oh
my
yes.
favorite one to watch. The visual style I thought was very interesting. How it's kind of had this, for all the changes the show has gone through,
Hmm.
at its core, it has remained almost exactly the same visually, structurally. A lot of these other game shows that get revived, they have all sorts of changes, and Family Feud was the one that I think more so than most others really stayed true to its core, even going through so many changes
Yeah,
over the
it
years.
definitely went through its changes, but like it eventually it kind of it it's like the saying you never really leave home.
You could say that, yeah.
Yeah, Family Feud kind of just cases back. So we go into, I think, the Dawson era.
Mhm.
Do you really have like your first real memory of like when you like first kind of like caught your eye onto like a Richard Dawson episode of Feud?
Not like a specific moment, but I remember I
Hmm.
was probably young. I'm gonna say second grade, probably. We picked up the Game Show Network, uh, and that was back when they were still running Dawson episodes regularly,
Hmm.
and I would tune in and see what was going on watching that. I was, even as a kid, you can tell that Dawson is good at what he does.
Yeah.
um, and I
Oh yeah.
remember also watching Combs. As a kid, Combs was my favorite. I really enjoyed
Oh
watching
yeah.
Ray,
I really loved Combs. I really did.
and that was my first foray into the darker side of the human condition. Was reading Ray's Wikipedia page as a 8 or 9 year old and seeing what happened.
Hmm.
And I remember it was late at night on my laptop and lit by nothing but the glow of the computer screen. And reading that story was, ooh, that was rough, and it stuck with me.
Mm. Yeah. I was about to say this is the perfect time to kind of say. I don't know if you've read Randy West's TV Inside Out.
I have not.
That is definitely a good book to buy. That last chapter, because Randy was actually someone who worked with Ray on Family Challenge.
Okay,
There's a lot of stuff like in depth, like in like Ray's like final like year or two. Don't get me wrong, it's a sad read. Like
sure.
of course, like just looking at Ray's Wikipedia is kind of just sad as it is because like
Hmm.
Ray had a lot of potential, and I really think if Ray could have like hung on, especially nowadays with how comedy is now, he definitely could have bounced back.
Yeah, it's a terrible situation. I tried very hard to handle it with
Hmm.
because I did not want to make a video like the downfall of the host of Family Feud, see the tragic story. Like, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to
Oh
be
yeah, and,
tasteful.
and I feel like most of those videos don't really capture the story well.
Yeah, I did not want it to be like just grabbing onto the drama because I mean it is an eye-catching story.
Oh
Anytime
yeah.
somebody big uh, or famous, I mean, commits suicide, it's obviously people are interested in knowing what happened. But I wanted to focus on here's what Ray did while he was alive. Here's what made him such a great talent, and here are the terrible factors that led to his fate.
Oh yeah, yeah. I definitely understand. I know, I definitely understand that. And I remember when I told you about when Ray auditioned for Classic Concentration.
Yes, you did. I cannot believe that that detail never crossed my path. But yeah, that was I
Hmm.
never knew that, and imagine what a different world it would have been.
Oh man, yeah. Like I'm like because when I first heard about it, I was like you. I didn't believe it at first,
Hmm.
but then when you kind of put everything together, because Concentration came on when they revived it as Classic Concentration, it came on in '87, and that was when Ray was kind of starting to really build his name up
Yes.
because he hosted the Family Feud pilot that same year in '87.
Hmm.
So a lot of that stuff, it really kind of adds up, and personally, I think Trebek was the perfect guy to do it. You
Sure.
just yeah, you cannot like I don't think you can beat Trebek. I don't know how much of Classic Concentration you've seen.
A little bit. I mean, it was never one of my personal
Yeah.
favorites,
Oh
but
yeah, yeah. It was never one of mine, mainly because I don't think I was that good at Rebus puzzles. But
But yeah, I mean Trebek is good in anything he does, but
Oh yeah.
it definitely is interesting to think what Ray's trajectory could have looked like
Yeah.
had they decided to go with Joe Namath. I mean, oh my gosh,
Yeah, that
that
was one of the
detail.
shocking things. I didn't know about that until I saw the video. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And I'm from Alabama. I go to the University of Alabama. Like that, Joe Namath is a name that is very important in my region of the country.
Hmm.
And to see that he almost took, I really want. I think that they taped some of the run throughs, and I have to believe that there's still one of them floating around in either CBS or in like the Goodson Estate somewhere. It's got to be out
Yeah,
there.
I know. Yeah, there's definitely like a lot of game show lore like that. Like I've always like been like very interested in because I can only imagine like like I don't know like your plans for future content, but like I can only imagine like if you ever really talked about like a lot of the shows that were victims to tape wiping.
Oh yeah, that's it. It'd be an endless list.
Yeah.
It's and that is what makes a lot of this so hard because I'll find interesting topics, and there's so little information, so little um, of these shows that have surfaced that it's hard to add anything
Hmm.
without the source material. There was an episode. I don't know if you saw a couple weeks ago. There was a full episode of The Wizard of Odds that surfaced.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
everyone was going nuts about that.
Yeah.
They're like, "Hell,
Yeah.
it's frozen over." There's an episode of that out.
So now I'm looking at that. I'm like, I wonder if I could kind of weave this into a video of its own. So we'll see about that.
I definitely think if you talk, because I know you did Wheel of Fortune, so I don't know if you have plans to do Jeopardy in the future.
I've always thought about it. I was actually brainstorming ideas around the time that Alex Trebek died, and I decided to put on hold for a little while, maybe pick it up later, because with him gone, if I was going to do that, I wanted to really do it right. And then, of course, uh,
Hmm.
got a copy of his memoir that I'd want to,
Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. You have the answer is yeah,
yeah. So
yeah.
I'd
I
want
got.
to uh, go back through that and take, adapt that and weave it in with other information and
Mhm.
really paint the full picture of the man that was.
Oh yeah, that's definitely. I definitely understand that. Because I definitely think that if you did Wheel of Fortune, you should do Jeopardy. Complete. The whole. Complete the set because that's a whole brother sister combination.
Oh yeah.
I'm bad about doing brother sister combinations and neglecting one of them because to this day, the most common comment that I get across all of my videos: when are you going to do the W video? When are you going to do the W video? Every other day, it seems like. Uh, and I actually wrote. I have probably about half of a completed script for a WB video just laying on a table, and it was something that I started and it went through. I there were 4 different times in production of that, script that I decided that it wasn't working, and I threw it all out and just started from scratch, and, it never got to the point that I was comfortable with. So, we'll see, but that is, to this day, the most common request that I get.
Mm. Well, yeah. Well, I do think that like the WB has a lot of similar stuff to UPN, but like I also there are a lot of shows that you can really make good points for that like really I think stood for what the WB like really was for a lot of people.
Mhm. For sure, there now, the WB, that certainly had some, good shows, but kind of the teen dramas that the WB was really known for, not my thing. I'm not really
Hmm.
into those shows, not really into Buffy or, Angel. It's just not my thing. I think the shows on UPN were more interesting. I think UPN was more interesting just because it was such a troubled brand that could never really get that identity, that it wanted, and it was just constantly trying new things and doing all these random, nonsensical, deviations,
Oh
whereas the
yeah,
WB was always
yeah,
kind
the
of
equivalent of
there was.
throwing stuff to the wall and seeing what sticks.
Exactly. I feel like the WB had cooler heads at the top, and that made for a more stable story for the WB, but also one
Hmm.
that's a little less chaotic.
Interesting. One of the bits from the back to the feud deep dive a little bit. One of the I think the strangest nuggets of information that we got through was that during the Anderson to Karn transition, Karn did that music video for the Strokes.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, seeing that video, it's just weird to me seeing Karn on Anderson's set. That makes me think, were they originally going to use Louis' set and then not decided not to at the last minute? Is there a lost pilot out there with Karn on the other set somewhere? Probably not. But one person told me that they were thinking that Anderson was out of the picture, and they were like, they just said, let's just go with Louis' set, and they might have been just blueprinting what ended up being Karn's set at the time, so they couldn't do it. But either way, that was one of the interesting bits there.
Yeah, that one I honestly don't really know what the deal was. I assumed that by that point, he had taped the pilot, been cast, and they just hadn't redecorated the set yet. But I know that around that time, with the changing of the guard at Feud, with Tribune taking over the distribution, and the Fremantle merger, all that kind of stuff. There were a lot of changes going on at the time. I have to assume that the set transition was kind of ordered from the top, somewhere along the line, and that just kind of got done in between the pilot being taped, Richard being cast, and the season being taped.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense because when you notice how almost every time they've had a host change, the set changes.
Yes, which is interesting. That's something, again, as a kid, I always picked up on. It was like you have these distinct eras, which make it a little more interesting to talk about.
Yeah.
And with O'Hurley coming back, it was the first modernization of the classic look. And then every year they change it up just a tiny bit. The lights are darker one season, then 1 year it's bright again, and then it's cool.
Yeah, you can never get it just right. It's always kind of tweaking the dials.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the sets alone are interesting to comment on. One of my favorite Family Feud video game adaptations for that reason is Family Feud Decades, where they have all the sets going on together. I wish that they didn't have the Dawson 94 set. Still annoys me just a little bit that they excluded it.
When they took the Opryland set and they redid it.
Mm-hmm. That's actually
that is an underestimated set. That really is an underestimated set in my opinion, especially when they had the red lights for Fast Money. Like they could have kept the red light throughout the game, I think, honestly, because the red looked really good.
Mm-hmm. Adding to the drama, yeah. I will. A fun fact about my channel is that before I got into UPN or any of that, way back in 2016, January of 2016, I would have been in 7th grade. My very first video on the channel was a review of Family Feud Decades, of that game, which I have since taken down because it was not very good. But because most of what I was doing was like these because I was still a very enthusiastic about Family Feud at the time, and I was making these extreme nitpicks at things they got wrong about the sets. It was like, and watching it back, it was like the developers, the designers, you can really tell that they were like doing their best, labor of love. And here I was nitpicking, oh, well, the board isn't the right dimensions. And I was like, maybe that's a little bit harsh.
There is a few Ludia games which you could say worse things about, though. So have you ever you ever saw Hollywood Squares? I think that was their worst effort. But Family Feud Decades wasn't bad. I'll give you that.
Yeah, a few decades. And I believe their Press Your Luck adaptation I thought was also pretty good.
Oh yeah, the Pressure Luck one was pretty decent, especially when they really did it on the PS3 because they put more prizes into it, which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, one of my critiques in the Decades video was for Feud they changed the prize to $20,000 across the decades. I guess the reason for that, being that you could use the money that you won to like buy different outfits or whatever. But I criticized that whole mechanic. I was like, you got to. Also, I want you to be able to select daytime or nighttime. Let's have the 5,000 versus the 10,000.
Oh,
let's
yeah.
have the bullseye round. If we're gonna go for it, let's go all out.
No.
I always thought the bullseye was fascinating. I never really thought it was. I stand by. I don't think it's a very compelling addition to the game, but I think that at least visually, the way that they decided to execute it, I think was definitely interesting. I think it made for an interesting chapter of that story. And the Family Feud Challenge pilot with the original format.
Oh yeah.
I had never, before doing the Feud video, I didn't even know that had ever surfaced. And while while I
Yeah,
was
because
watching
like
that pilot, the first time I was watching, I remember just being so confused because I genuinely could not keep up with what was going on, like what was actually the format of this game. And as I paid closer attention, I was like, okay, I kind of get what they're doing here. What a weird idea.
And it's a
yeah,
it's a
like
it's a good thing that they didn't end up
that
with
was
that.
just a really disgruntled pilot in every sense of the word, because like you play the classic feud game, you play the bullseye game, then you play the classic feud game, then we have fast money, then we start all over again with like with a game which plays similar but points wise, scoring wise, completely differentiates from the first half.
Trying to explain that in a way that made sense, like putting that into words was I think I went
Oh
through
man,
3 or 4 different
man,
drafts of
I could only imagine how difficult that was.
If they had ended up using that format for good, I bet they would have been done within like 3 months, less than a year. But
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
that I'm definitely glad that cooler heads prevailed. I
one
really
thing
wonder
I
who it
noticed,
was that ultimately made the decision to dial it back a little bit, because it seems like uh, whoever dreamed up Bullseye probably had a lot of sway to get that many changes made in the pilot stage. So
hmm
I wonder who it was that said we can't do this.
yeah, and that also makes me wonder. And that also makes me wonder as well who compromised with Richard when he returned, because Richard wanted to get rid of Bullseye altogether.
yeah.
That's true. Yeah. Pro- yeah. There's no telling. I wish that a lot of the people that worked on that version of Feud are no longer with us. So
Yeah.
it's hard to get those sources.
Mm.
I guess Jonathan Goodson is still out there, but I didn't really want to try to get a hold of him, but considering the circumstances.
I also wonder whose idea was it to go from 5 family members to 4 in that year. But
That's interesting. I wondered about that too. I I also really wonder who dreamed up the caricature bit for introducing
oh,
the families.
Oh man, yeah,
Wh-
I was just thinking that exact same thing, because like yeah, like how did we get from like these caricature intros for these families, and then
hey,
how we get from
it was
five
the
to four.
'90s. They thought needlepoint was out of style, so they thought caricatures was the next best thing. I don't know.
Well, I kind of understand the reason that they did something else, because they're using the Opryland set and they don't have the inset living rooms anymore, so they can't do that like they had been doing. So they
Mhm.
needed something else. Just why they decided on that specifically will forever elude me.
Mhm.
Yeah, like that is like, so like there's just a lot of stuff I think from Ray's, like when they expanded it to an hour to like Richard's to when Richard returned, that whole like 3 years of feud, there's just a lot of interesting stuff that like happened in that time, because Goodson Todman was changing like completely because Goodson had passed.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then when Goodson had passed, that pretty much, that changed a lot of stuff around. And, I think, that definitely hindered Ray a lot, because he lost his biggest supporter, because Goodson was always a supporter of Combs.
Yeah. One thing about back to Bullseye a little bit. I noticed that Bullseye, really more so in when they brought it back in 2009, it would make the questions for the main game a lot more difficult than they should be, because during when O'Hurley had the Bullseye, those triple answers would be 6 or 7, when usually the rule of thumb is the triple questions usually always top 4 answers on the
Really.
board. But yeah, O'Hurley, who's like, okay, triple top 7 answers on the board, and it was just like a regular question. I'm like, no, that's not how it should work. But that was just a minor nitpick for me. But and
Yeah.
another thing I read somewhere that the Tran family that was on the last episode of Combs, apparently they were in they came back at least one time on the Dawson comeback, but that hasn't surfaced yet. Would like to find that soon.
Oh, really? Wow, that'd be. Ooh, I wonder why they decided to come back. That would.
Yeah. Maybe they
Yeah.
decided, oh well, you guys effed up, and we got rid of our last host, so you guys can come back. That was another theme of the '94 version, because they would bring back other families from the old show and doing the
Yes.
second half of it. So
Let's give you an episode where the host doesn't run off at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if a version of that would surface in higher quality than it is, because at the moment it looks like it's from the original broadcast and the video quality is so. But a
It's
lot of
interesting.
some of the early ones are on Prime in really good quality. But whether we see that come up, we'll see.
While a lot of these I'm pulling from YouTube, these episodes that I'm using in the
Oh
videos, just
yeah.
because that's the easiest way to get
Yeah,
them for sure.
that's the most way to really watch a lot of game show stuff nowadays
Mhm.
is YouTube, because almost everything you can find is on there.
And what's really interesting is that for whatever reason, the O'Hurley era of feud is just critically underrepresented on YouTube. I had trouble finding clips to use for that section of the video. My my theory is that like around that time, maybe people were like really the last of the VHS tapes were going away, and people were really like all TiVo all the time. I don't know if there's any truth to that hypothesis. I just wonder why there. Maybe it's because the show was doing so poorly at the time. It was interesting to me that from 2007, 2006 through up until Steve came along, it seemed. I
Yeah.
mean, the clip that I used of O'Hurley introducing the bullseye round was this terrible VHS um, copy because it was
Yeah, there's
almost
just
one of the
not
only
much.
ones I could find. So I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and then like I remember looking at like something. Like, I remember looking at like Family Feud's like original like YouTube channel, like at like at the time, because they had a couple of bullseye clips uploaded, but like like because a lot of the stuff like they first uploaded was not in like really great quality.
Hmm. Yeah, I think they were limited by what YouTube was allowing at the time because they were capping all
Hmm.
their uploads at probably what 360p back then. Uh,
Yeah, 360p in only like a few minutes.
mhm. It was interesting too that the very first video that I included in part three, where the first upload to the Family Feud YouTube channel, and you can find it, it's still up, is an unbroken, unedited shot from one camera, taking audio from one microphone somewhere, unedited, just raw. Like it literally, there's a face off, and it follows the contestant at the podium. One of them, it just follows her back to follows her back to her family while O'Hurley's over somewhere else doing the show, and it just camera stays on her, and because I guess they keep that shot. I don't know how that happened.
That's strange.
Yeah, like oh man, it's just so peculiar. But like we, like we go to like when Feud first got revived back in '99, and because I'm very curious. I was very curious. And like it probably deep down really wasn't possible because because Louis did pass away while production of this video was filming. But like, was Louis Anderson like ever like on your mind to like? I wonder if I could get Louis's real perspective on his time on Feud.
Absolutely. I just was not sure how to go about reaching out to him. I did tweet at Richard Karn and John O'Hurley both because I thought, well, they're both on Twitter. Maybe they'll, you know, take notice. Neither of them responded. I think I took the tweets down, but I did attempt to get that, and I reached out to Gabby Johnston, or yeah, I think that's her name, Gabby Johnston, the executive producer of Family Feud, who has been EP since I think '02, since Karn came around, and also worked on the Combs version at one point, I believe. And so she's like the name to know in Family Feud. I reached out to her through LinkedIn of all places, and she responded. And she initially expressed interest in being a part of it, but it was around the time it was their busy season that she was working on. I believe Celebrity Feud at the time was getting their episodes filmed and taped,
Oh yeah.
and so she ended up redirecting me. I kind of got passed between a few other people, and ultimately led me to Bob Bowden. Still incredibly thankful for his willingness to participate in part three. Great to get his perspective. But we
Absolutely.
taped that interview on Monday, and I think Louis died on Friday. Um, it was right
Hmm.
before. It was terrible, and I was actually setting up my microphone to record. I had the script for part three done. I was about to record the whole thing, and I'm setting up my microphone, and I open up my phone. I'm like waiting on something to load on my computer, and I'm checking Twitter, and I see that Louis Anderson is trending, and I'm seeing, oh, I wonder what's. I bet he won some kind of award or something. I'm excited to see why Louis Anderson is trending. I thought, oh, what a
Yeah. Oh
coincidence.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I see that he died, and I just sat there, frozen for a little while. I was like, oh my gosh, what are the chances of this happening right now? It was terrible, so I made a little post. This is Louis, and genuinely, everybody that you can find talking about Louis, but even before he passed, when I was doing
Mm-hmm.
research for the main video, everybody made some mention. Louis Anderson, tremendous person, nice, caring, kind, not a Hollywood jerk, not at all the opposite of that. Everybody went out of their way to make that comment, and especially after he died, the tributes that poured in, everybody seems to be in agreement that Louis Anderson was a great person.
Very nice.
Yeah, because
Was Bowden difficult to reach at all, or how fast did it take to get him on board?
Not really. It helped that I had been in contact with Gabby, and that was kind of what made the connection. So it wasn't this total stranger reaching out to him like, "Hey, can you do this thing for me?" So
oh yeah.
we had that connection there, and he came on. We talked for probably about 45 minutes, all told, and getting that edited down. Editing an interview and incorporating it into a video was a lot harder than I was anticipating. But I think the end result was really good for those portions of the video that he appeared in.
Oh yeah, because I definitely think that Bob Bowden definitely gave a lot of additional depth, which really made I think part three I think your most real significant part out of all three of your parts of the feud documentary. Because I think because part three is like still I still kind of go in to part three every now and then because I'm like, oh, I think I missed a little bit of something
Oh yeah.
in it. Yeah, because your videos they're that in depth where you watch it one time I think just for like the enjoyment of everything, and then another time you're watching it like, oh, okay, like what did I not catch this time that I watched it that I catch now.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, keep inflating that view count. I appreciate it. Um,
Right.
Yeah, get this man to 100K. We gotta start the
yeah, one of these days, if there's 100,000 people out there that care about this stuff, I will be
because your
astonished.
your real Fortune video, it's pretty close there. It's at like 92 last time I looked at it.
Yeah, it got hit with a surge of popularity out of nowhere in January of 21, and I'm not sure what led to that. I think maybe there was maybe Pat was in the news or something. Maybe the algorithm just
Well,
caught on to it.
I remember at one point when Pat had the surgery, but I think that was a couple years.
That was after I was able to include
Yeah.
the surgery in the video
Hmm.
because that was a few months before I started doing
Hmm.
that video, and I'm not sure. Maybe, yeah, I don't know. I genuinely have no idea. But January 21, it just whoop, and then it went right back down. But hey, for that little moment, I
Yeah.
felt like a star, and it's awesome seeing like comments rolling in like a few every hour. I felt like a superstar, and it's interesting. One of my uh, part of in fact, my little avatar on YouTube is that little stick figure guy with the little glasses with the blue
Hmm.
background. That was drawn by my closest friend in the world. His name is Harrison, and he runs his own YouTube channel, completely different from mine. He makes these videos where he makes cartoons talking about his life, and he includes his real life friends. I'm one of them, and it's called Toasted Noodle. He recently surpassed 100,000 subscribers. So we have two people in our friend group that are like, we have the real YouTuber, and then we have me, kind of the niche, documentary guy who does his own little thing over here. So that's interesting. We've kind of, exchanged notes, and his audience, there's a small overlap between the people who are watching cartoon storytelling videos and people who are interested in game shows. So I've got that market locked down.
Of course.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Because one thing like I really do like commend you on is your extensiveness. You know.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And it's I never set out to make an hour-long video. Whenever whenever I start these videos, the breakfast time video recently, I started that one saying, I think this will be about a 20-minute video. When I started the UPN video, I thought this might be 45 minutes. When I started the Feud Part 3, I was expecting it to be the shortest of the series. I had no idea. Now, the Bowden interview did stretch it out a little bit, but I had no idea it was going to end up as long as it was. So I never set out to make these super long videos. I just discover all this information, and I think this is all too interesting to make cuts. So a lot of it makes the final
Mhm.
cut, and the script just kind of keeps getting longer and longer. And I do cut things out, believe it or not. There are things that I deem too tangential to make the script, and there are times where I'm like, this is getting too long and cumbersome, and I go in with my scissors, and I start cutting things out of the script, or start really consolidating things, like 3 details that might have had their own sentence all get kind of warped into one sentence. So I do try. These are long videos, and I try to make sure that every second is well spent. I don't try to. These videos aren't lengthy for the sake of being lengthy, because that doesn't benefit anybody. There's that much cool information that I feel like
Yeah,
these
there's
guys should
always
know.
there's always a lot of cool stuff that's in these videos, and which always makes me wonder. Like, one day, do you ever like plan on like releasing like the director's cut style
Oh.
of videos?
I've never thought about that. I could. See, the thing about that is that when I'm editing the script, when I remove things, I remove them. So there is
Yeah.
no
Mhm.
like final script with like everything in it before I make my cuts. Now there are times that I actually go through something is in the script, I record it, I edit it, and after it's all said and done, and I'm actually editing the video, I think I don't need this detail. I can cut this out entirely. So doesn't happen like too terribly often, but there are things that get cut in that final stage of the video, which is always interesting because I can always tell that there's a slightly abrupt cut between one thought to the next. Like there's not that perfect link and segue between them. But I think that it's one of those things. I'll always know that something's wrong, but the audience
Oh
will
yeah.
never. Well,
Oh
they'll
yeah.
be none the
Oh
wiser.
yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Because we only see like one end of the project. You get to see like
Mhm.
the whole 360 degrees of it. So
Oh yeah, and it's man, when I was doing the feud video, I remember there was one night that I was in the home stretch of writing that script for part 3, and it was like if I heard the words Family Feud again, my head was going to explode because I was just like I was so deep into it at that point, and I said I'm going to go on a drive, and I'm just going to empty my head. I'm going to play some music, empty my head, and the whole
Don't play the
time.
Family Feud theme.
Oh,
oh
no, I wasn't that sadistic to myself. But what ended up happening was I started thinking about the feud video, and I started turning the volume down, and I started reciting to myself what I wanted the last part of the video to look like. And I was like, and that's one of my things when I am writing the script. This is interesting. I I say it out loud as I am writing it to get an idea of what it's going to sound like. So a lot of the scripting, editing, revision process is vocal, and I get in my car, or I go for a walk or something and talk to myself. I probably look like a lunatic walking around talking to myself, but genuinely that helps me kind of, because when you hear what it sounds like, it kind of helps you form that more cohesive vision for what the end product is going to look like. But that whole 60-minute drive, I just recited the feud script to myself the whole time. I was like, what am I doing to myself here?
That's impressive.
I don't know
yeah.
about that. But it all turned out well. So
Yeah, it
there
all
you go.
turned out well, and it's if you haven't seen the story of Family Feud on Connor Higgins' channel, like all 3 parts, you definitely should watch it. There's a lot of great informative stuff. It has the great balance of, if you were just a casual game show fan, you'll enjoy it, but also if you're like a really like hardcore game show fan, there's a few things in there that you probably didn't know in there. So
There's at
you
least
know,
one thing that was never released, at least to my knowledge, to the public, and that was the detail about Rock Feud, which was shared with me by a Fremantle individual who I don't know. I could not find any of that information except for the fact that the pilot was taped. I found it on precisely one forum. It was referenced that the Rock Feud had happened, and that was the extent of it. But the information about who the host was, and kind of the format, who the contestants were in the pilot, you have to watch the video to find out. But that I
mhm.
think that was the first time that information had ever been published.
Interesting. Have you ever thought about using any of your research videos for a thing for school by chance? Like for a research project or something, like I say, do a do a thing about something you know a lot about or really like, and you could just say, "Oh, well, I made this video here. Look at that, great that." Have you ever thought about that?
I'm not sure that the opportunity has really presented itself. I did actually, my style for doing videos was greatly informed by school projects that I did. The
Okay.
first video I ever did that I considered to be like in the style that I do now, it was a video I had to do for my 8th grade history class talking about the assassination of James A. Garfield. And I went through and did this whole, we were supposed to make a 5-slide PowerPoint. And I thought the story was really interesting. So I said, "Can I do a video?" And she said, "Sure." She said, and then I said, "Do you have a maximum length for the video?" And she said, "Oh, minimum length, 2 minutes, And I said, "No, no, no, maximum length." She said, "Maximum length." And she said, "No, just don't worry about the maximum length." I was like, "Are you sure?" But yeah. And then I presented her with a half-hour video, and she said, "Okay, I see what you mean now."
Bravo.
But that was where a lot of that skill kind of got honed, so that by the time I got to UPN, while by no means a perfect project, I at least had a little bit of experience in telling stories in this long form and working with visuals on screen. Even though still in UPN Part 1, I had no idea what I was doing. I was looking, I didn't know what keyframing was when I was making the UPN Part 1 video. So keyframing is essentially, in Final Cut at least, you say, for this frame, I want it to be this, visual to be here. And then at the next keyframe, I want it to have moved somewhere else. So you set keyframe 1, keyframe 2, and then in between those frames, the object moves or does your desired action, right? I had no idea that that existed. I was moving things frame by frame at some point, just doing this manual animation, tapping and moving things across the screen, or using these rudimentary plugins where I had to use like sliders and say I want it to move to this X coordinate and this Y coordinate over the span of this time. It was awful. Luckily, I learned about keyframing right after I released UPN Part 1, and that made the rest of my life substantially easier.
Interesting. And where did you find out that? Because you said in the Rock Feud apparently used the first iteration of the Think music that played during Fast Money.
That was revealed to me by that same individual from Fremantle. He said that was the product of that creative team, and they brought it over to use in the main show.
Yeah, how about it? I think they should come
I
on.
mocked up the logo. I don't know what the logo actually looked like. I just went into my graphic design software. I was like, I wonder what the logo would have looked like, and I just kind of mocked up my best version because I needed something to put on the screen.
Oh yeah,
while
yeah,
I was
yeah,
talking
yeah.
about
You
it.
gotta have something to kind of just display Rock
So
Feud.
but I think it was like the Lost Media Wiki or something has made a entry for Rock Feud. The pilot has never surfaced, and they used my little logo. They said this is the
Yeah.
logo for the show. I'm like, well, not exactly. That's what I imagined the logo would have looked like, but
It'd be cool if there was a Polka Feud, but that's another story. That would be my game show.
Oh man, so yeah, so now I think we're in, I think the point where I think where you're at in your content now, and that is breakfast time. So
yeah.
yeah, I'm very curious, and I think of like, how did you first discover breakfast time?
That was so I think I had been vaguely aware of it because I read Wikipedia all the time, and I'm sure at some point I had been on Tom Bergeron's Wikipedia page. He'd hosted Hollywood Squares, America's Funniest Home Videos. I mean, AFV particularly important to me. That was one of my favorite shows as a
Oh yeah.
kid. It still holds a special place in my heart. So I'm sure I had read about it at some point. I had it vaguely in my mind that, oh yeah, he hosted this morning show on Fox at one point. That was the extent of it. I'd never sought it out or watched it or anything. And then around the time that Bob Saget died, I started, I was that news hurt me as well because I also like, Bob Saget, his
Oh yeah, Bob Saget's death was a shocker. That
Mhm.
was a real shocker for everybody.
Yeah, and it really caught me off guard. And so in the aftermath, I was watching Saget episodes of AFV, reading his Wikipedia page, and that kind of led me back to AFV and Tom Bergeron. And I'm reminded of this breakfast time thing. And the thing that I thought was interesting was that Fox After Breakfast nor Breakfast Time have a Wikipedia page unto themselves, which I thought was kind of odd. Everything has a Wikipedia page. So I was like, well, I wonder what the story is here because aside from being mentioned on Bergeron's Wikipedia page and maybe like the Fox Wikipedia page and FX at certain points, very little information on Wikipedia about this show. So I was like, I wonder what the story is behind it. And I turned on an episode of Breakfast Time, and I just remember sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I am really enjoying this. Like, actually, not just as the novelty of this being this weird 90s morning show that Tom Bergeron used to do, like, just actually as a viewing experience, this is really good. Why doesn't anybody remember this show? So that, I mean, I literally called the video the Forgotten Morning Show because it
Mhm.
genuinely seems like
It's
outside
forgotten.
of the small community that watched it religiously, that it has completely evaporated from the cultural conscience. And of course, what happened next in the upcoming video on Fox After Breakfast kind of helps explain why it did not have a longer run, and kind of why it faded into the obscurity in the collective pop cultural memory. And I thought, we need to shine a spotlight on this, if for no, just to remember what it was and appreciate it for being such a unique, innovative concept that has not been replicated at all since. It was really one of a kind, and I think it deserves to be remembered. And my hope is that after these videos, somebody will make a Wikipedia page for the show that it deserves. Yeah, that's how
Interesting.
I.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely found, breakfast time to be, just from like those clips, I definitely found it to be just, it definitely was a complete deviation to like what we see in just a standard morning show.
Absolutely. It
Mhm.
was Peter Feynman before Peter Feynman. I don't think I mentioned this in the original video. Peter Feynman,
Mhm.
who was like the brainchild behind FX and Breakfast Time. He was also the director for Crocodile Dundee. That was what he was best known for. Probably still is today. Uh, but he said in his pitch to Tom Bergeron, there is nothing else like it on American television, and there really wasn't. It's genuinely insane to think how free reign they had, how much resource. I mean, FX essentially gave them a wad of cash and a mandate to make the best morning show that you possibly can, and that's exactly what they delivered. It is it's wonderful, and I encourage anybody who enjoyed my video, go and seek out a full episode of the show. I mean, they're out there. There's an individual named
They
Rob
are.
Blair who has this tremendous archive without which my videos would not have been possible, because there's just so much. When you consider how obscure this show is, the fact that there's that volume of it out there is, I think, very impressive. So it's out there. Go watch it. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and definitely keep your eye out from on Connor Higgins' channel. Keep your eye out for Fox After Breakfast coming out very, very shortly.
Mhm.
So keep your eye out for that. And if you haven't seen the first part of Breakfast Time, also be sure to check that part out. Very, so especially if you're a fan of Tom Bergeron, there's a lot of great montage clips of Tom Bergeron in that video.
Yeah.
Some I even mocked myself, especially like when Tom said, "Oh man, we are so behind schedule."
Yeah, yeah, and they were in double digits, and they flashed double
Yeah.
digits on the screen really big. Like, it was this that kind of I think the way that I phrased it was, the show is live, so things are gonna go wrong, things are gonna not go as planned, and you can't undo anything. There is no edit button, you can't rewind. I mean, what happens happens. And they were like, "That's awesome. Let's have fun. Let's move fast, break things, and let's have a really cool morning show that makes the audience feel like they're along for this just nonsensical, chaotic ride." So
Mhm.
very, very interesting way to start your morning, and I think that it was tremendously executed.
Oh yeah, and and the crazy thing is, there's nothing like it on the air today,
Absolutely
which
not.
is
Um, and there was even
it's like the best way I think I could describe Breakfast Time, and like you could like tell me like like if you see this or not. It's like a radio show but on TV.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the comparisons I made at one point, in just the whole idea behind the FX network making
Hmm.
so much of it live was, yeah, take television back to its kind of radio roots. And you can see a lot of that coming through in it definitely resembles a radio show that's televised more than it resembles Good Morning America, for sure. And that's just
Oh yeah,
is more.
just looking at the weather reports that they did. Imagine if Good Morning America did like one of those weather reports. Oh man, if you
Wow.
need anything else, yeah, you're at the wrong place.
It's incredible. And again, I feel like just the fact that nobody remembers that this show existed is terrible. And I was hoping to at least shine a little spotlight on that, and it paid off because the pinned comment on that video is one that Tom Bergeron himself left in appreciation. He actually shared the video on his social profiles, which was just incredible. So I got his seal of approval, so that ought to be enough for you to go and check out the video.
Yeah, that's very
Yeah,
good.
yeah. It's Bergeron approved, people. So
Bergeron, I think, has actually appeared in more of my videos than anybody else, I think, because I featured in the UPN video, there was
hmm
a clip of Mad TV that I included. They did this Hollywood Squares
Oh
bit,
yeah, the Hollywood Squares Stars of UPN
the
segment.
stars
Oh
of
yeah.
UPN, and
Oh
the
god,
joke
I
being
remember
that there were only 2 squares filled because UPN had no stars, right?
Mhm.
And they got Bergeron was actually they got him to host this Mad TV spoof. So he was in that video. I think I mentioned him in one of the feud videos right around the part 3 because it was around the
Oh
time that
yeah.
Hollywood Squares was being brought on. I mentioned that just kind of
hmm
background information. And then for this, in Breakfast Time. And of course, he'll be in the Fox After Breakfast video as well. So that's he's made a lot of appearances.
hmm
Something I was thinking about.
Yeah, well, I guess it kind of, I guess eventually kind of like you kind of like hinted around Tom Bergeron. I guess it kind of makes sense for you to kind of just kind of go full circle if you know, to kind of go full circle into making a series, into making like a small series about, a show that Tom Bergeron did. I guess it kind of, makes sense in a lot of ways if you kind of put that in kind of retrospect.
Uh, kind of, yeah. In fact, at one point, I weighed doing a history of America's Funniest Home Videos because I think that's interesting. Now, there was actually ABC right around the time that Bergeron stepped down from that show.
Oh yeah.
They made a documentary called America This Is You. You can find it online. That I watched that and I felt like it did a very good job. I didn't think that there was a whole lot that I could really add to that conversation. My thing is I want to go where nobody else has really definitively gone before. I think they covered it there, but I did think about that. So that was another thing that led me to do research about Bergeron. And the Breakfast Time video was weird in that there were a lot of those kind of. I had to do a lot of research about Bergeron's career prior to Breakfast Time, which was a rabbit hole in and of itself that I spent, I don't know, 2-3 minutes on in the main video, probably longer actually. And there was also the bit that I did about the building that FX was based out of, 212 Fifth, which
hmm
led me down one of the weirdest rabbit holes I've ever gone down in a video, where I was to talk about this building because it was very important in FX's production. So I dive into like New York geography, trying to trace the history of this building and the things that surround it. And I remember there was one point where I was looking at some government archive issued map of New York from 1911, and I was searching for like the intersection of 26th and 5th so I could see what building was on that corner. And I kind of have this out of body experience where I just thought, wait a second, wasn't I making a video about a TV show here? What am I doing? What am I looking at these old maps like some sort of historian? What am I? This is ridiculous.
Well, in a lot of ways, you really are becoming an historian in a lot of ways, if I say, because you were literally documenting TV history.
Yeah.
That's the goal. I've I need to get better at keeping a list of the sources I use and making those available. I'm just not very good at that. I read something and it just kind of I instantly insert it into the script or insert it into my notes, and I'm
Well,
adding.
not only that, but not only that, but like I can imagine your sources list being like just a scroll of
a,
sources.
a lot of where I get my information from. There is this incredible archive of broadcasting publications. You too might be familiar with it. It's called worldradiohistory.com. It's all sorts of magazines, Broadcasting and Cable, Media Week, and several others. Years and years of archives, OCR'd, publicly available, and you can Google search them. So what I do a lot of times is I'll just if I'm searching for Family Feud, I put in quotes Family Feud site worldradiohistory.com, and I get every time that Family Feud appeared in one of these industry publications, and I literally click on every single one of them to see what was going on. That's where I pulled a lot of those ads for Family Feud in the industry, trying to get stations to buy it. That's where those came from. That's an incredible source of information that I get a lot of these articles and stuff that I reference from. So there's a resource if you're ever, and it's just cool too to go back and look
Mm-hmm.
through these issues from the 90s and see what was going on in TV, because it's an industry publication. So they're talking about shows, they're talking about ads, and they're talking about broadcasting technology, which I think is interesting. Like the revolution of this new taping system. Like, oh, wow, that's kind of dated poorly. But it's a trip if you ever feel like searching it out for yourself.
How about it?
Oh yeah. So yeah, like I think we've definitely we've discovered, the man who makes the content. Now let's kind of like let's look at the man behind the content. Like let's say what are some of the things that like you really call for you the simple life?
The simple life.
What?
Like, I feel like that's a hard question to answer. I'm in college, so I do a lot of stuff with my classes. That's kind
Mm-hmm.
of what occupies a lot of my time. And, you know, solid group of friends. I just like to, go out, have a good time, live life for what it is. This is probably the hobby that takes up the most of my time. I've never been really big into like, some of the typical, like I've never been into cars or video games or anything like that.
No.
Never really my things.
Mm-hmm.
So this occupies a lot of my time. Of course, I love to watch old game shows, old episodes of TV. That I
Oh
spend
yeah.
probably too much
Yeah.
time sitting on the couch. But yeah, I love just going out with friends, having a nice meal, laughing it up. That's those moments are what make life worth living. So that's kind of the what I spend a lot of my time doing, as much as I can anyway.
Yeah, and I think those are, I think, the best words to end it. The simplest words a man can say, and I think those are the best words that we can end this interview with. So first off, Connor, we want to thank you for your time with us.
Absolutely,
Absolutely.
enjoyed talking to you too.
Yeah, we enjoyed having you around. We hope to have you around sometime again.
Oh yeah. And
For sure.
so one last question: are there any other game shows you'd want to do a deep dive of in the future?
Oh, the one that I've thought about is Match Game. I think Match Game has a really interesting story with a lot of odd revivals. That's kind of
Oh,
one that's
Oh
been
yeah,
definitely,
yeah. We,
definitely.
we were yeah we were at before you came. Me and Danny, we were actually talking about Match Game,
yeah,
a little bit before you came. Yeah.
yeah. So no promises. A long way between having the idea and having a finished
Oh,
video,
of course.
but
Oh
that's
yeah.
something that
There's
I've definitely tossed around quite a bit.
yeah.
And there's a lot of non-game show kind of concepts that are within TV. I have this whole list of ideas of
Mm-hmm.
things that I want to cover at some point. Some of them being like profiles of individuals, um, both within and without game shows. Some of them being, about like talk shows. Uh, so all manner of unscripted TV. I think is kind of fair game for my channel
Yeah. So
or the TV
yeah,
business for the W video that I have not ruled out yet.
the WB video coming soon.
Coming soon. Has been coming soon since 2018. Uh, so soon is a relative term.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, man. Yeah, Connor, thank you for your time. Thank you for everybody who has watched this video. We hope that you guys take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we will see. We hope we'll see all of you guys again down the road sometime. Until then, this is P1 saying peace out. Take care, everybody.
See you next time.